Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, it's good to be back with you again. Wanted to talk a little bit more today about what we call the Domination Index, which is a very, very interesting thing here. As I've mentioned in the video, I think it was yesterday, the Domination Index you might also know as an SD score. It comes from the book Baseball Dynasties by Rob Nair and Eddie Epstein. I changed the name to Domination Index because SD score doesn't really mean much. I know that what we're actually computing are z-scores, and instead of taking the absolute value, which you're supposed to do for the z-score, we're allowing positive to be positive and negative to be negative because we're looking at the number of standard deviations baseball teams are away from the mean. So all of that is, of course, very interesting and probably a little bit geeky for you. I do have a couple of articles on my blog about this. What I did want to look at here today, though, was something that's kind of interested me for a while, which is questions like, what are the best run-scoring teams in the history of, let's just say, the American League? And I asked that because we just went through another game with the 49 Red Sox, who didn't do so well this time around, but when you look at them in the overall context of the league, are actually pretty powerful. So without any further ado, we'll take a look here at the screen. This spreadsheet is a spreadsheet that I offer, by the way, on my blog for those who want to be part of the membership area. It's a, how much does it cost? I think it's $5 per month, or you can get a full year for, I think it's $50. That will give you access to this as well as other spreadsheets and other bits of data that I am yet to make. You can't find this information on Baseball Reference, by the way, for whatever reason. And so we've had to kind of bootleg this together. The way that this works is pretty simple. I mean, we go through and we take the numbers of runs scored for every single team in the league in a certain year. We compute the average, and then we also compute the standard deviation. In other words, the which is what the number of runs within a certain percentage of the average. The reason why we do this is because we're looking for outlier performances. In other words, offensive or defensive performances that are significantly outside of the average and could point us to a team that is playing very, very well. Now, instead of going through and doing a whole bunch of research in this one, I just want to sort of show you what the results look like here, because it's pretty cool. I mean, there's some teams that we're going to recognize right off the bat, right? 2015 Blue Jays, 2016 Red Sox, 2007 Yankees, all teams with very impressive amounts of standard deviations away from the numbers of runs scored among all teams in the league. Now, notice that we're looking, though, right now only at runs scored, not also at runs allowed. The Domination Index itself is a combination of runs scored and runs allowed and is not made up of merely runs scored alone. And that's one of those things that you really have to remember. So a team like, say, the 1982 Brewers, we all know the Harvey's Wallbangers Club, the old Brew Crew, end up in 8th place in the history of the American League for numbers of runs scored away from the standard deviation. But their Domination Index rating doesn't look that good. This is a really good team, probably a pennant-winning team, but this is not a team that was one of the most dominant teams in baseball history because their overall score is not above 3, right? That tells you that they had probably some problems with pitching, which I think most people would agree with. You can also see the same thing here with, say, like the Detroit Tigers of 1935 and so on and so forth. And one thing to notice is that the clubs here that are hitting the very, very top of this chart tend to not be clubs that are scoring over 1,000 runs. And the reason why is because when you score 1,000 runs, we have to look at this in terms of what is happening in the league overall. So when the 31 Yankees scored 1,067 runs, it's impressive, but it's not necessarily as impressive as the Blue Jays scoring 891 runs in a different average run environment. You can see there's a huge difference there, and in an environment with a different standard deviation of runs. 1930 does this as well to an extent, has a huge standard deviation. Same thing is true of 1927, and because of that really big difference and gap between different teams, scoring a whole ton of runs more than the opposition doesn't quite look as impressive, right? Put it all into perspective, if you haven't looked at this before, right? A team like the 84 Tigers ends up with 3.654 as their domination index because they were great on offense and on defense. And here are the 27 Yankees who have 1.853 on offense, 1.797 on defense, which makes them also one of the best teams of all time. Now, we can fight over, is it actually true that the Tigers in 84 were a little bit better than the 27 Yankees? I mean, maybe, maybe not. It's not really a metric designed to measure everything with this pinpoint accuracy, right? You can see here the 39 Yankees as well with this 3.517. And so it gives you sort of an idea, though, overall of what you're looking at. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is because of these two teams. We have the 1950 Red Sox and then the 1949 Red Sox, who we just saw. 1949 Red Sox we can probably talk about first. They were just under 900 runs in the season, one of the best offensive seasons of all time, among the top 50 in the history of the American League. And there's no question this is a good offensive team, and that they had fairly good defense and fairly good pitching, definitely above average, which gives them this 2.335 overall domination rating. This is, I believe, as I glance through this, I think that they're the highest rated 1949 team in terms of offensive effectiveness. And, it stands to reason. I mean, this team ended up just barely missing the pennant, finishing a game out of first place, missing it on really the last game of the season. The interesting thing, though, to look at is not just this 49 team, but rather the 1950 Boston Red Sox team, which is a team that many replayers know of because of that sacred 1,000 run barrier, something that even in our day you don't see a whole lot of teams breaking. 1.88 is their run scored standard deviation, which is a bit higher than the 49 team, but very similar with a very similar roster. But the thing that got them, of course, was poor pitching. If you've played with this team, you know that the pitching is not good, and that's a problem, right? The pitching in the American League in 1950 wasn't exactly great, but for the Red Sox, it was far worse than great. If you try to play with that team on a replay, you're going to find yourself very frustrated because they're going to score a whole bunch of runs, and then they might give up more runs than they score and end up losing anyway. So some real interesting things you can look at here and some interesting stuff to play with. You can also hear as you go into this, it's going to take me a little while to have this actually work. If you want to look at the best pitching performances, we can sort by the runs allowed, standard deviation, and see how many standard deviations from the mean certain teams are. And there you have it. And guess who it is? It's the 1967 Chicago White Sox that end up number one, followed closely behind by the 1990 Oakland Athletics. I think that the 1990 Oakland Athletics probably will come to mind most readily for you when you think about really great pitching teams in relation to what the league was like. There are a lot of questions here, too, and things that I haven't really looked too deep into. There is a chance that there's a little bit of a bias due to the home park, though I would argue that when you combine the two in for this domination index, a lot of that bias ends up going away. So we can do that here really quickly as well. Take a look and see who they say some of the top teams overall of all time are. Cool thing about this rating is that you can have a team that's really, really good at pitching relative to the league and yet have them not be the best team of all time. You need really that combination of both to be among these teams when we're talking about the 98 Yankees, the 84 Tigers, and so on. I might have to look a little closer to the 2015 Blue Jays and make sure I didn't make some sort of transcription error or something like that. There are other teams that we can easily recognize. Interesting enough, 2022 Yankees are on here as well. But yeah, 69 Orioles, 1990 Yankees, 70 Orioles, and some of the better New York Yankees teams from the 1920s, 1930s, and on we go, and on and down we go. Cool thing about this spreadsheet that I've made up, of course, is that we not only have this for the American League, we also have it for the National, going back to 1893. And we'll look at that a little bit later on. We also have it here for the Federal League, so you can just look at this at a glance since there are only 2 seasons, and you can see pretty quickly that the best team in Federal League history was the 1915 Chicago Whalers, and just barely, by the way, up against the St. Louis team in 1915. And the worst team in Federal League history was clearly Baltimore in 1915, who had a domination index rating that would probably qualify them as one of the worst of all time. I've shown you this before, too. We have this also for the Japan Central and for the Japanese Pacific Leagues. We'll look at all of that a little bit later. And like I said, you can also use this to sort by the worst teams of all time. So if you're using this at home, I have this spreadsheet uploaded for members in both ODS format and in XLSX format. Should work with Microsoft Excel, though I haven't played around with it that much. As you can see, though, when you can use this and you can mess around with it, you can sort it different ways, you can get into it, you can find whatever mistakes I made, and you can yell at me about them and so on and so forth. We look at the worst teams of all time. I wouldn't argue much with the 16 Philadelphia Athletics or the 1919 Philadelphia Athletics. This 1919 team is interesting because for years they had the record for the most number of players used, right? Which only replayer type geeks know about because Connie Mack really was cycling through players trying to find somebody who could play this here game. Yeah, that's a crazy team to try to replay if you really want a challenge. And you'll notice, too, a number of dead ball era teams, the Senators 1904 and 1903, were pretty bad. And I think that you can say that this was a bad team. 1908 New York Highlanders is a team that we know about. Are they really that bad? I don't know if they're that bad in the replay. Again, I might want to go around and take another look at this. Teams that we would normally recognize as bad would be the 79 Blue Jays, which have been historically recognized as a really, really poor team. 78 Mariners, I would say the 1980 Mariners are probably a little bit worse. There's the 77 Mariners. And we can go on and on. 87 Indians, we know about some of these poor teams. Let's see if the 88 Orioles, they're up here. Yeah, this is another team that we recognize right off of the top of our head. And then the 96 Tigers. There's some pretty bad teams on this list. Real fun to play around with, and like I said before, as much as I hate to, try to give you a bunch of advertising and promote mass consumerism, if you want this, you can go on to my blog. I've left the link down below. If you're a subscriber, paying subscriber, you'll have access to this, as well as other stuff that we'll do. As I continue to do little statistical things and stunts and stuff like that, my rule of thumb is to tell you exactly how it is I'm measuring what I'm measuring, and then to give you the data if you're a paying subscriber. So if you don't want to pay, you can always go and take a look, and you'll see what the formula is, and you can spend the hours to put it together yourself if you really want. And as always, if you found mistakes, and there probably are some there, let me know, and I can fix them. Talk to you later. Bye.